I had to chase a duck around a parking lot this morning, and I don't know how to deal with that because it just was so out of context that I'm not sure what's going on anymore. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WildWeiler Weekly Wrap. As always, I am WildWeiler. Spring has arrived, and it is weird. Moments before filming this week's Weekly Wrap, I helped a woman chase a duck around a Trader Joe's parking lot. Now, Wild, why did you do this? Well, before I arrived at the Trader Joe's, which shares a parking lot with a diner I wanted to go to get some pancakes for breakfast, there was a woman chasing a duck. And the duck wasn't flying away, and I was like, that's weird. I wonder if this woman raises ducks, and she's like meeting somebody in this Trader Joe's parking lot to sell them a duck. Which I probably should have realized because it was a mallard. That's not really the case. They're very native to where I live. It didn't really look like a farm duck, which are generally like a solid white color or other sort of like clearly domesticated duck color. Anyways, so I get out and I'm like, hey, do you need help? And she's like, yes. And so I help her chase the duck for a bit and I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, well, I found a whole bunch of ducklings in a pond and I put them in a box and I'm going to take them somewhere else because they shouldn't be in a parking lot. Which, okay, true. Like a whole bunch of baby ducks shouldn't be in a parking lot. It's also like 7 a.m. Nobody else is in this parking lot and they would have kind of like moved along on their own. So that's kind of what I suggest, is like, what if we just take this box you have of ducklings and we take them to the park in view of the mother duck, keep her, like, I'll sort of walk behind the mother duck to keep her heading towards the park while you carry the box, and we let them go in the park. And the woman agreed to that, and we let the mother and baby ducklings go in the park. They reunited. They're fine. They appear to be fine. I will say that's a myth that animals will abandon your babies if you encounter them. That's a lie. That doesn't happen. The danger of you interacting with baby animals is rabies, in that a lot of animals have rabies. A disturbingly high amount of animals have rabies. I was going to say a disturbing amount of animals are rabid, which I guess would also be true. The point is in places like Virginia, where there are a lot of wild foxes, fully a third of tested wild foxes have rabies. It's not a great thing. And rabies, if you don't know, is 100% fatal if you show symptoms. So you really don't want to catch rabies. Nobody has ever survived rabies. At all. Period. End of story. That's why you have to report animal bites or other animal encounters, because it's just a very bad disease. Quartzgazart has a very good video on rabies that I'm putting in the description, and I highly recommend you watch because I am actually very passionate about this subject, because every year well-meaning people take in baby animals without handling them correctly, potentially expose themselves to rabies, and then the baby animal has to be killed because the test for rabies, to be absolutely sure, is fatal. Because the only way to fight rabies is, as soon as you're exposed to it, to be given the vaccine, because as it turns out, our body can manufacture antibodies and defenses for rabies faster than rabies can move through our bodies. So it's not good. And that's why you really shouldn't handle baby animals. And we'll have another segment in this very weekly wrap about not handling baby animals. Good news is, ducks, not a vector for rabies, and it was a lot easier to just be like, maybe we just take these ducks right here and leave them alone, than it was to convince this person not to box up these ducks. Like I said, a well-meaning person. I arrived when the baby ducklings were already in a box, or I would have suggested not boxing them up to begin with and instead sort of shepherding them across the street back into the park where they belong. But everything worked out. And that's really what you should do if you encounter somebody who's handling an animal that they shouldn't. If it's a mammal, that's not great. And you shouldn't just not call the animal control people because now you're worried that the animal might be killed. Rabies is serious. So please be careful. Please learn about when it's safe to handle animals and when it's not. And if you find baby animals where they're not supposed to be, please contact animal control. They are professionals. They know how to handle animals in ways that do not pose a harm to you or them. And especially now that it's spring, there's a lot of stuff going on. So I mentioned I was going to talk about another thing. It is the 1st of May. So happy May Day, everybody, first of all. Second of all, Within the next few days, the first batch of American robins are going to come raining out of the sky. And why is this? Well, robins have to fall from their nests as part of their maturing process. Every robin falls from its nest, from the nest to the ground. Now, the good news is robins are small enough and their sort of mass to volume ratio is such that they actually can't die from a fall of any height. You can throw a robin off the Empire State Building, and if it chooses to hit the ground, it will be fine. A mouse, if you do that to a mouse, then this is true, will bounce and be confused, but completely unharmed, because these animals have a really favorable volume to weight ratio, which basically means they can absorb a terminal velocity impact without any harm. The point is if you see a fledgling robin, they look like this image right here on the screen in front of you, on the ground, leave it alone. It has entered the stage of its life where it must fall from the nest in order to learn how to fly. This is crucial. This is important. Its parents are nearby, hiding in trees and stuff, observing it. They will chase off any sort of major predators. And some robins honestly don't survive this stage, and that's just nature. But the thing is this robin that you are seeing on the screen is not accidentally out of the nest. It has gotten big enough to where it is ready to explore. And it needs to learn how to fly if it is going to survive migration. And so the best thing you can do for it is leave it alone. That is, it's where it's supposed to be. The other fun fact about American robins, because I love this bird, is they do this like 3 times a year. And what I mean by that is American robins can build up to 3 nests a year and have 3 broods a year. So you might see these again in 2 months and then again at the end of summer. So this happens. It's good to know. They're doing fine. That being said, if you do see a robin smaller than this on the ground, you should consult an expert, honestly, and that expert might tell you a number of things. One of those things can include, and I'm not an expert, mind you, I'm not an expert. One of those things can include carefully picking up the robin with a gloved hand and putting it back in the nest. Birds won't abandon their young because they smell like you. They absolutely love their young. Like, birds are very good and very skilled parents. If you're not on Twitter following the Murphy saga on this note, do that. Birds know how to be parents. And sometimes little babies do fall out of the nest. And they look like little naked, like, birds. That's how you can tell. The other thing is if the nest itself, if the whole nest falls out of the tree, you can just pick up the nest and put that back in the tree. Just try to put it approximately where it was. The parents will find the birds again by their, sound, their feeding calls. But, yeah. Anyways, long story short, don't touch baby animals. Call animal control. And if you find a bird on the ground that looks like a fledgling, leave it on the ground. Sorry, I am very, very passionate about these topics in particular. And other than ranting about birds, I didn't do much this week, to be honest. I watched the 1995 Sam Raimi Western, The Quick and the Dead, which is a very interesting Western. It features a very young Leonardo DiCaprio talking about how fast he goes through girlfriends.
Whew. Damn, am I fast. Did you even see me? I was so damn fast. Woo! Fuck.
And a lot of Sam Raimi style crash zooms. And it started out well enough, and it got really just kind of worse as it went on. It has an okay enough premise, which is to say it's your classic Western revenge premise, which is like, father is killed, child seeks revenge. It flips the script by Sharon Stone as the lead, and she does a really good job. It really just kind of goes south. It doesn't stick the landing. It really doesn't stick the landing. And in a very weird way. In the last, scene of the movie, Sharon Stone, whose character has been a drinking, cigar-smoking, gunslinger woman who has a historied past that you learn that maybe some of these assumptions you made about her aren't true, is weirdly make-upped up in the last scene and just the last scene, where if anything, due to the nature of the plot, she should be more covered in mud and cigar ash. And that, really bothered me because, everybody else is all gritty and messed up, and she's suddenly beautiful by modern beauty standards. As where before she was very grizzled, it's just weird. And that pulled me a little bit tonally out, and then the landing doesn't quite stick, but that's that. If you're into quirky 90s westerns and you like that kind of movie, you should watch Tombstone instead. It's a better movie and really fun. And finally, to talk about a third thing in today's weekly wrap, we're going to hop over to Wikipedia's list of common misconceptions. So buckle up, everybody, because this week's common misconception is that there's no such thing as the Dark Ages. Like, they weren't a thing. Sure, there's a period of time that we call that, although historians now kind of prefer you call them the Middle Ages, because that's really what they were. They blend the time between, the end of the before Common Era and the start of the Common Era, and then the sort of Renaissance. There is about a millennia in there. But it wasn't full of sort of religious superstition and brutality and ignorance. You can actually see a pretty serious and steady improvement of how things work. Look at all the castles that exist today are more or less from that era. We stopped building hill mound castles and bricklaying became a much more solid art. Lots of bridges from that era. Like, architecture really improved, and we can take design cues from that about how the rest of things went. Like, people were still learning. Maybe not in the way that everybody expects, because, like, everybody thinks, turn of the Common Era, the Greeks and the Romans and philosophy and blah, 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 blah. And we don't talk about that as much from the quote-unquote Dark Ages, but as I mentioned, there wasn't a Dark Ages. It's the Middle Ages. There wasn't a sudden rampant religious superstition and brutality everywhere. It was just a normal time in human history that also had the Black Plague, which was really bad. Don't get me wrong. That slowed, things down for a bit, but it wasn't like bad in the way that we think it was bad. It was bad in the way that they didn't know how germs worked bad. So everybody kept getting cholera or something. Anyways, that does it for this week. Thanks for watching. Stream's coming up. I have a stream on Thursday night. It's going to be pushed back a little bit later, like 7:30. I'll get that precisely up over on Twitch. And on YouTube, we have the third episode of my Link to the Past Let's Play. I kind of explore Hyrule a little bit more. I get the, ice wand and kind of just run around and figure out what I'm doing next. Both of those things are happening, so go check them out if you're interested. Thank you for watching. I will talk to you next time. And this has been WildWeiler signing off on a very rambly weekly wrap because, frankly, I had to chase a duck around a parking lot this morning, and I don't know how to deal with that because it just was so out of context that I'm not sure what's going on anymore. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.